edition of Agora Discourses. Yesterday was the International Day for commemoration of torture and celebration of torture victims across the world. So, in regard to the fact that torture remains a very, very serious issue in Uganda, we thought it wise to have this discourse and reflect on a problem that has persisted in this country right from colonial times to now. We've had that issue of torture. So that's why we have this space today. I see Aaron Kiza is here. We are going to be joined by someone from SCTV and a police officer. The security forces are often pointed fingers at as some of the main perpetrators of torture. We'll perhaps get to hear their side of the story as well and see how we can collectively address this problem. So if you're supposed to be a panelist and you're here, kindly request for the microphone. I can't seem to figure out your handles. So Alex Chigonye and SSP Chintu Ruth, kindly ask for the microphone. And how you do that is by pressing the button, the icon, microphone-like icon to the left of your phone screen. Patrick, please make Agatha a co-host. And yes, I see. Yes, the police officer is here. We are glad to have you, SSP Chintu Ruth. Now we have one panelist to go, and that is Alex Chigoye, the head of programs at the African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, an organization dedicated to the work of ending torture and helping victims of torture cope. Patrick, again, please make Agatha a co-host. She's the one hosting this space, not me. I'm just holding place for her. And at some point, we'll have a live, excuse me, at some point, we shall let in members of the audience. So if you want to contribute to the discussion by way of a question, by way of a comment, by way of sharing a story, for instance, if you know something, you will be allowed towards the end. So just hang in here. When that session comes, you will join the discussion as well. Yes, and if there are any torture victims here, I want to say it at this point as we hold on with as we wait for Agatha, that ACTV has a lot of materials and help for persons who have suffered torture. You may want to check out their website and see how you can make either use of them by going there physically, but the directions, of course, will be on the website, or by just reading some of the material on their website. It could prove very helpful for any victims of torture out there. And if you've suffered any form of torture, we at Agora stand with you, and we hope that it never happens again. And we call upon those that perpetrate the torture, of course, to stop it, as it is a barbaric way of running any country or of doing anything for that matter. So, Patrick, please make Agatha a co-host, and then we can have the discussion. I've done the same. I have sent it to that one. But whichever you're using is the one you should use to join. The one you're not using, you shouldn't join with. Now we've dropped the senior officer. I hope she'll join us in a bit. Now, Aaron, as we get these other sides sorted, I just want to look at the legal side of the question of torture. You said it's internationally illegal, and I assume even locally it's illegal. So can you just take us through some of the clear guidelines, both international and local, that prohibit torture?
All major international instruments prohibit torture, starting with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was enacted in 1948, and that is really the Bible for human rights at an international level. So does the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So does the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and so does more specifically the Convention Against Torture, and they prohibit it in absolute terms. And that is mirrored here in Uganda by Article 24 and 44 of the Articles 24 and 44 of the 1995 Uganda Constitution, which is operationalized by the Prohibition and Prevention of Torture Act that was enacted in 2012, and which has the torture regulations, that are cited to the year 2017, and coupled with major policies in UPDF are supposedly against torture. So the absolute prohibition of torture means that there is no excuse for torturing in law. So you cannot torture people in war, you cannot torture people in a public emergency, you cannot torture people because there is an order from above, you cannot torture people because of superior orders, you cannot torture people because there is some absolute necessity. Torture is perceived by those laws at international and national level as being antithetical to civilization, as also being dehumanizing, in a sense that when you torture a person, you are degrading him to the level of a stone. I remember in P3 we were taught that science is a study of living and non-living thing. So you are degrading through torture a human being from the position of a living thing, specifically an animal, into a state of being a non-living thing, such as a stone and a stone or a rock. Of course, that was a science of 1993, and that was the year when I was around 1993-92 when I was in P3. We now know better, because there is no such a thing as a living thing, because all the things, according to the Gaia theory, are propounded by James Lovelock and now eventually accepted as part of science, is that all things in the world, in the universe, are connected, are interconnected, and we know that soil is living, not dead, and there is something called soil biodiversity. Back to torture. So torture, I said, is prohibited in war, in public emergencies, it is not allowed as a defense to any crime or anything. It is prohibited even in the laws of war, or the Geneva Convention stop war. That is, it is a war crime. Torture is also a war crime. So there is no body of law, whether being international or national, that has some leg room for torture. Certainly not in Uganda, where I've said that Article 44 also prohibits in those absurd terms torture. And I've talked about the laws we have. Let me say that specifically for security agencies, they have an obligation not only to investigate torture, but also to report it. So if you are a police officer, an army man, and you see someone being tortured, the law obligates you, the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act, and the regulations made there under, respective of 2020, of 2012 and 2017, obligate you, one, to investigate the crime, two, to report the crime, and certainly to stop it. You have obligations to stop torture. You have obligations to promote freedom from torture, to respect the right to freedom from torture, and ensure that there is a public awareness about those obligations, and they need to stop it. Toko, is there some nuance you wanted? All law that is also mirrored in Uganda's jurisprudence. Many cases really that I wouldn't enumerate, including the famous case that the Susan Chigora that clarified our law on the death penalty, and some of the cases I have, for example, been part of. The Zake case, the case of the lost child I talked about, Hajara Nachito, probably the latest on that issue. Cases of activists, all judges agree with that basic legal norm, and any disagreement is on the applicability. Of course, torture, like any other crime, like any other legal allegation, has to be proved by evidence, but it doesn't mean that you must have medical evidence, as the Court of Appeal has also clarified. You can just have oral testimony, you can have circumstantial testimony, because people must remember that torture often happens in dungeons and is done by people who don't want it to be known and who are afraid of the camera and who even beat up journalists, like you saw after the 2021 elections. The journalists who attempted to cover Bobi Wine's presentation of a petition to the UN Human Rights Office were corroborated, and my friend George Musisa and I had to again engage UPDF and courts to get them some remedies. At least those who were brave enough to seek the remedies, many were not only tortured, beaten up by a team led by Colonel Napoleon, Lieutenant Colonel Napoleon Namanya of the military, whom the military kept shielding from scrutiny. But they went ahead and intimidated them. They said, don't, even unfortunately, even some media houses were cooperating with those moves to discourage journalists from suing, saying, have you now become an activist? So I urge media houses to allow leg room to journalists to defend their rights and also to support them, rather than siding with the military functionaries trying to discourage them from seeking accountability for people who harass them. You can see that torture happens to journalists, torture happens to lawyers, torture happens to suspects. Torture really happens to everyone, and everyone is a candidate, unfortunately, for torture in different forms. Now, torture, it can be physical, such as being beaten by a gun butt and being kicked about maybe in a police cell or even on the street. But it can also be psychological, it can be mental. You can be depressed, you can be taunted, and it is in the way it is torturous. You can even be tortured into stopping conducting these spaces. They may start making you anonymous calls that discourage you from doing your activism work. I'm seeing Jim Spire. One time he had scared us with a tweet that goodbye, I have tried. I think people had started disturbing him. I hope they are no longer disturbing him. Luckily, he's here, he can tell us. But in this work we do, there are all sorts of subtle, indirect forms of discouragement, and sometimes they can get to you. But the other category of torture, which most people don't know, is secondary torture, which someone from ACTV should describe. Someone like me, when you listen to torture victims, it tortures you. I am Chukuma, I should disclose a secret. I see Apollo here, but I think one time he listened to a story of people in Mubenda and he shed tears. Imagine sending a lawyer and he sheds tears. So, but we break down. One time I was trying to talk about a specific torture issue and I broke down and I stopped because it can overwhelm you. These stories are torturous in themselves, and the law is not sophisticated enough to capture that nuance of secondary torture, and you may not get the remedies, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist. And like there is one case I handled, it took me like 2 years to recover from it. And of course, there is no space for recovery in Uganda. You must keep earning bread. You must keep working. So we need, people need psychological counseling who live torture chambers, but also the people, the ecosystem around them can also get infected and share. The direct torture victims get nightmares. They are among the biggest examples of mental torture. Most of the physical torture also triggers mental torture. It gets to your mind, to your head. Someone touches you and you want to fight or run away or shout, getting erratic because it has got into your bone and marrow, and you are getting, people get dreams, people get nightmares, people get scared. But there are also people who are dumb, who are numbed into complete silence. In Uganda, it's called okuwunga. The guy seems he doesn't want to even talk about it. Have you ever tried someone to engage on a topic and they just don't even want to talk about it, or even you talk about it, they cry, or they just shut out in one way or another? So torture is a big elephant. It depends on which part you touch. but I hope I've given you a snapshot of some of its manifestations. Thank you.
Thank you. Agatha, you here now?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so let me just try to get the police officer on. You can carry on from here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry I had connection issues. So yeah, I don't know where to start from, whether to start afresh or I don't think Godwin has briefed me very well on what has happened in the last 20 minutes. But we're glad to have you on the space. And the space is mainly to commemorate the International Day in support of torture victims that the UN introduced and is observed every 26th of June, which was yesterday. And also to, at least what I heard from Aaron Chiza's submission is really comprehensive laws against torture in this country. And for me, I thought that's the biggest question we need to address, that we have all these laws, we have ratified all the international treaties that prohibit torture, from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights to the Convention Against Torture, the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. When you come here, you have Article 21, is it 21 or 24 of the Constitution? But also that it's one of those clauses that are non-derogable, that you can't have an excuse against. You have the law against torture itself of 2012. Where do we still see a problem that you have seen people tortured day in, day out? We were trying to get a victim today who is one of the latest victims, called Ronald Maega, a member of NUP, that a supporter of NUP that was released, was among the 32 political prisoners, but was the one of the 4 that were lucky to get bail last year, but was picked up recently and tortured and sodomized, and you know. There's also a young man that had said he would join, who was tortured on the orders, he says was tortured by a CMI agent. If I see him, he will share his experiences if I see him on the space. I think the case we all remember vividly was the case of Kakwenza recently. But also the other issue is the use of sex as a weapon. I don't know if Aaron, that also is can be discussed under this here, because we have had so many people that have been sexually abused in these detentions. So yeah, in case you had not responded to that question, Aaron, where is the problem? I would like to respond. I would like for you to respond to it.
Agatha.
Yes.
Just before Aaron comes, he had taken us through the legal framework, international and local. He had shared with us a question on his own experience dealing with torture and how he got into the space that pushed him into helping torture victims like he does legally. But now, also to inform you that at this point we have the full panel constituted. Chintu Ruth is the police officer and Chigwe Alex is the man from ACTV. So you can carry on from this point.
Thanks. Yeah, so Aaron as asking if you could, in your experience with this issue and torture victims, if you could point us to where the problem is, after looking at, you know, all the plethora of laws that we have that should protect people from this deadly vice.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to where the problem is, I want to take on what you talked about, sexual offenses, sexual as a method of torture. Yes, clearly sex can be torturous, especially rape and defilement. it has been used even in forced eviction as a tool of disempowering victims. You know, torture is it dehumanizes you, and when people want to turn you into a victim, people want to torture you mentally. There are few things that can be as mentally torturous to someone as raping them, as defiling them, as handling them in a sexual manner inconsistent with their consent. So that is, I hope, clarified. And what the problem is there are probably a number of problems. Let me start with what is not the problem. We have enough laws. Laws are not a problem, and another law will not solve our situation. What the problem is called impunity. What the problem is that we have a militarization, a military atmosphere, what I call in summary, a military dictatorship. What the problem is failure to enforce the laws that we have, the policies that we have. We have a tendency to be very good with making good laws, proclaiming them in the media, but implementation is weak. Even merely finding individual police officers culpable is a hurdle, because even among the people campaigning it is the chairperson of Uganda Human Rights Commission, on record, on press. So in a country where we have some blind people in positions of authority talking irresponsibility about the subject of torture, you think torture will stop? No. If we don't hold individuals in the military, in the police, in the business, in the politics who are torturing people, will the torture stop? No. Why? There is need for deterrence. So we need to simply implement the laws we have. We need the judiciary to come out very strongly and deliberately hold torture culprits accountable, and we need this justice, torture justice, delivered quickly, in time to make a difference, and in time to negate the idea that justice delayed is justice denied. So if I may say it in one word, it is lack of implementation of our beautiful torture law. Until we translate it from the pages of the Constitution onto the streets, onto the military barracks, into the courtrooms, into on ground, and people know, and someone carrying in charge of a police station, in charge of a battalion, knows that if I break the camera, if I break the leg of a Ugandan, I will pay for it with time in custody, then it will not stop. The atmosphere, of course, the general idea is one of impunity, bad governance, but the practical one is implement the laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Ruth, can you hear me? Afande Ruth? Alex, are you on? Oh, yes. Good evening.
I have a network challenge. First, I was using a laptop. I've been advised laptops can't work. I've now switched to my phone, but still the volume is very low. However, that aside, good evening, everyone. My name is Chintu Ruth. I'm a senior superintendent of police. I'm a legal officer from the Directorate of Chief Political Commissariat. I'm here on behalf of the Inspector General of Police, particularly representing the Commandant Professional Standards Unit, a Department of Police mandated with investigating and handling cases relating to torture, especially torture by our own girls and boys on Uganda police uniform. I'm nice to be here. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you.
Yes.
We are happy
that
to
is
have
what
you
I
here.
can say. However, the volume is very low, and
So
I don't know what I can do, but I'll try.
Ruth,
Sorry?
can you hear me?
I can, but very, very low. Yet I've done everything to increase my phone's volume.
If you have anyone in the house that has earphones or headphones, it would help.
I do. I've tried all that.
Okay, so
I've tried all that, but
I think you have to strain maybe and hear the question, and then after that, because for us we can hear you very clearly.
All right.
So I wanted to ask the reports about torture from Human Rights Commission, from the Committee in Parliament on Human Rights, from these organizations that work in that space, show that police is the leading perpetrators of this vice. What is the problem? Ruth, can you hear me? Did you hear the question?
Agatha, she has dropped.
Oh no. I was very happy that we have someone to ask the questions to, but we hope she returns. I think let me go to Alex now. Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, Agatha. Hopefully you can hear me as well.
Yes, I can hear you. So anyway, for the viewers, maybe to remind you, Alex Kigwe works with the Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, and would like to know the trend. Is it something that we have started seeing now? Is it on the increase? Because we remember, I think it was 2017, when Nalfenya became very notorious, and there was a mayor from Kamwenge that was tortured to almost the level of losing his legs. We would like to know from you, the people that have been following this, to describe the trend for us. Is it something that is on the rise? Is it something that increases during a certain period, maybe electioneering, or is it something that actually is there at all times and maybe has not changed much from the time the current regime took power in 86 or before that? So if you could briefly describe for us the trends of torture in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Agatha. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Alex Chigwe. I work with the African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, an organization that advocates against torture and also provides holistic rehabilitation to survivors of torture. We have a team that is mandated to provide holistic rehabilitation services that includes medical treatment, psychological support, legal aid services, and social support services, and work in the entire country. So on a daily, we receive survivors of torture that come to us seeking rehabilitation services, who have been tortured in so many ways, just as Elon has described. There's so many ways that and forms that exist in Uganda, and there's so many areas where people get to be tortured. Averagely, I'll say that as an organization, we receive 1,000 survivors or people that come alleging to have been tortured on an annual basis. Of course, this is worrying, with the fact that we have so many good laws, as Aaron has described them. And of course, as the question that you've asked, what is the problem? Where is the problem? And I believe us here, we should be able to, all of us, contribute to this conversation and trying to answer what is the problem. But going back to the question, what has been the trend? What are the trends as we see in our daily work? I'll say that torture remains high, not only in our reports, but even in the reports of the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Even though you trace it back, there's so many years, torture remains the #1 human rights violation. And of course, I would say that there are contexts that sometimes lead to a spike in these numbers. We get high numbers of torture during election time. And of course, here there is a lot that happens. We have charged oppositions, but we also have the government in power trying to use coercive force many times to manage elections, and all that we have been observing that happens within elections. And of course, looking at the last elections, where there are a lot of allegations of enforced disappearance, illegal detention, abductions, there was a very big rise in numbers of torture and also acts of ill treatment. But also of late, we are seeing a context of land conflicts, which has also led to a rise in numbers of torture. So when you take the examples of what is happening, for example, in the northern Uganda, when it comes to the land issues, there's a high spike of cases of torture in that area. When you look at the central part, go to Mubende, go to Mityana, there are a lot of cases related to land issues, and of course these ones are both perpetrated, I'll say, with the knowledge of the state, but also there are those cases which are perpetrated purely by private individuals, more so in the context of land conflicts and land disputes. We are also seeing a high trend when it comes to the oil-rich area. That Bunyoro area has experienced high numbers of torture when it comes to the land, more so evictions for the construction of the pipelines and all that is involved within the oil sector. So there has been a lot of reports coming in, also related to issues of torture, and victims also alleging instances of torture that they have experienced in that context. Currently, we are also seeing a high trend when it comes to the Karamoja region. Of course, Karamoja region has a mixture of issues. There is a disarmament military operation that is going on, which has led to a rise in a number of torture cases. And this one dates back to almost 2000. So all along this disarmament process, and of course the operations against cattle rustling have led to a rise in cases of torture, but also where there are other minerals, for example, gold in Mubende, in Karamoja, all of these have also been a driver to the rise in cases of torture. But generally, we have also seen a growing trend when it comes to private perpetrators. So we have seen instances of torture when it comes to homes as well. We have seen so many stepmothers torturing children, husbands going beyond domestic violence and having these instances that are very grievous and extreme to account to a case of torture. So basically, we have also seen that growing trend, but also issues of mob justice being on the rise as well. But of course, this can also be related to a growing mistrust within the system, that people, instead of resorting to having the system, the criminal justice system work, where you report a case to police and then it's investigated, then the state prosecutor takes it up and then it's prosecuted. Because this system, people are losing trust in it, then people have resorted to mob justice, which is also on the increase. So when you read our reports of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, so you will see these trends of private individuals really also getting into cases of torture and contributing to the rise in torture cases. But I'll say that there has been a lot of milestones really registered. Besides the laws that have been put in place, there have been also deliberate actions in terms of capacity building of the different state institutions. You will see that, for example, in the UPDF, when it comes to the Directorate of Human Rights, it is trying its level best to build capacities of the military officers to behave in a manner that respects human rights, a manner that respects the right of freedom from torture while implementing their work. The same applies to police. The same applies to also the prisons. So there are these deliberate actions that are being taken, but of course the problem still exists, and the problem is still with us here. And these trends, of course, I'll say within the different contexts, they rise, but also I'll say that continuously torture continues to grow, despite the so many actions that we are putting together as a people.
Thank you, Alex. That although of course when you say that there have been interventions that apart from the laws, yet we are seeing increase in rate, it doesn't provide any relief. But thank you for that elaborate submission on the topic. I see we have Ruth back. Ruth, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Is your volume better now?
Yes, it is better now.
Great. So before you dropped off, I was asking a question that reports about torture have put Uganda Police Force as the #1 perpetrator of torture. And I was asking where the problem is from someone who is not only a member of the UPF, but also who works closely in that department of torture prohibition and standards and discipline. Spire, if you could please mute your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, dear viewers and listeners. First of all, I just want to communicate the Uganda Police position on torture. As Uganda Police Force, we strongly condemn torture. No person deserved to be tortured. And I just wish to also continue that all of us are potential perpetrators of torture, just as all of us are potential victims. As a force, we do state that allegations or cases where police officers have been identified as perpetrators of torture, that is individual responsibility. And whoever is mentioned, whoever is investigated, whoever is proved to have involved in acts of torture or conduct of torture does so on his or her personal behalf, and liability is individual. True, as a force, we won't say we are 100%. We've 100% done our best when it comes to prevention and prohibition of torture, just as the laws and regulations are. However, as a police force, true, we always rank #1 in most of the human rights violation reports, in most of the torture reports. We do rank #1. However, as a police force, those are examples and those are cases that arise out of individual weaknesses, and liability, like I've said, is individual. As a police force, we have departments, particularly the Department of Professional Standards Unit. We do investigate not only torture, but other human rights violations and professional misconduct. We do investigate when an allegation has come up. We investigate, and we are not courts, we are not tribunals to decide cases. As Professional Standards Unit, or as a force generally, after investigations have been concluded, we forward our files to the office of the DPP, where we get advice on charges that are preferred based on the evidence assembled. we've always been faulted for perhaps shielding our officers, shielding or not portraying statistics or cases that we've handled, especially against private individuals and other sister security agencies. However, I just want our viewers and listeners to understand that police, upon investigating and assembling evidence, we forward our files to the office of the DPP, who advises us on the preferable charges we should slap against an individual. I always, whenever I go for workshops or fora like this one, I always urge everyone, wherever you invite police, kindly invite a representative from that office, because when we investigate our cases, we forward for legal advice. Yes, we have lawyers. Personally, I'm a lawyer in the police force, but I don't have mandate to sanction. The constitutional mandate lies with the office of the DPP. When I assemble evidence is pointing to torture, and the state attorney or the land principal chief attorney prefers to charge someone under the penal code. When I'm compiling my crime report, I'm going to capture that case under grievous harm or assault, simple assault, like that. So I just call upon organizers and stakeholders to always bring on board the office of the DPP, because all what we do is crowned with the legal advice when it comes to constitutional sanctioning of charges of the DPP. I also want to note that, yes, police officers are always involved as alleged, and they are always handled. We've had so many dismissed. We've had so many after criminal conviction. We've had so many dismissed. It is a policy and a force that upon criminal conviction in a formal court, you are dismissed. But even where the DPP has not preferred criminal charges against a police officer who was alleged and proved to have committed acts of murder, we have other disciplinary sanctions like reduction in rank, fines, cautions. We have, as the disciplinary code says. However, I also want our viewers and listeners to know that the rate at which torture cases are rising is not only police. It is not only police that are perpetrators of torture. Like my brother Alex has submitted, the rising cases of torture are no longer as a result of police misconduct or something. We have so many cases we are investigating as police against private individuals. For example, in our homes, the nannies, how we treat those nannies, how nannies treat our children. We have other members of the public who perpetuate torture. Recently, we've watched clips where just a mere expression of a right to freedom of worship lands someone into trouble from her very, very close families who are supposed to protect her against all forms of human rights violations. We've had cases where children are burnt just because of the worsening economic situation. A child aged 7 years admires a band from the shop, picks 1,000 shillings from the mother's bag, and that is just alone to have her fingers or his fingers cut off by the very parent who is supposed to protect. So the worsening economic situation, the rising insensitivity among all of us has led to these cases arising. But the reason our reports, like I've read the statement recently launched, that we don't have specific statistics on torture cases we investigate, whether against our own or against the private perpetrators, is because the DPP has perhaps advised us to charge under grievous harm. Grievous harm is under the penal code. Simple assault. So let us have that office on board to advise police to specifically. Only then shall police be able to capture those cases rightly as torture cases. I also wish to comment on the fact that as police, professional standards unit, There are cases that come as allegations of torture when actually someone is trying to evade justice. Someone knows he's yet to be convicted. Someone knows he did this and this against the law and he's being apprehended. They will run and start alleging torture by police officers. There are so many cases PSU receives, but some of them may not progress because upon investigation, such cases are seen as trumped up. Someone is trying to evade justice, and because police is always tainted with bad things, so some of those people who come to complain are actually not telling the truth. What else can I say? Yes, like I said, apart from torture, we handle other human rights violations because human rights are intertwined. You can't say you only have a right to freedom from torture when you don't talk about a right to representation, a right to knowing the charges slapped against you. So as police, as long as an allegation has come up against a police officer, we handle holistically. And most of these cases are isolated. You find one in Arua, you find one in Kabale, you find one in Mubende, you find one. So, like I said, everywhere, everyone is a potential victim. However, as a police force, we commit ourselves to fully and effectively by observing the law, by enforcing the laws against torture and other human rights violations. We are committed as a force to ensuring that, like the theme is, all communities are torture-free, all people are torture-free, and no one is a perpetuator of torture.
Thank you.
For now, like I said, my volume is low. For now, that is what I can submit on. Thank you.
Ruth, before you go, I would like to ask, there's a question that I don't know if you answered and I didn't hear, because I'd asked where you think the problem is. Is it in the training of the police? Is it in the law? Why do we still have 1,000 people reported have been tortured every year, despite the laws against torture that we have?
Thank you so much. Like I said, whoever is on uniform, whether police officer or other sister forces, whoever involves in acts of torture does it on their own, and the liability is individual. So some of the causes I would maybe suggest the way we think. A police officer, you are trained, we undergo the same training. How come Ruth does not torture? How come for that 20 years I've been in the force, how come no allegation of torture has been raised against me? So some of the cases are individual personality. Then I think some bit of frustration. Some people may have their own frustrations, but they bring the frustration on innocent individuals. And again, it is, when you look at statistics, it is not only people on uniform. I just want to clearly state that it is not only people on uniform. My brother Alex might bear me witness. Among the statistics you have, how many cases by fraction or percentage have been reported against people on uniform? We have torture everywhere. But I would think the worsening economic situation, in my personal opinion, is making torture cases rise. Then too, it is not training, because we've had so many trainings. Our good partners like Mr. Chigonye, we have Human Rights Commission. Every year they take us through trainings, sensitization drives. However, for some reason, the cases, personally, I would attribute it to the worsening economic situation, especially arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. We will get back to you, Ruth. I don't know if you had... Yes, we will get back to you, especially on where you said that some of these officers have undergone disciplinary action. Maybe I'll ask these people that are here that have been involved in this to say if that's the case, because there's, for example, a DPC that was in Hoima that Aaron would know, because they have been on that case of evictions, illegal evictions in Hoima, where women were raped, children were beaten and tortured. And the DPC, Aaron, if you could remind me the name, who was reported to the standards unit, but we have not heard of any action that has been taken against him. As Aaron comes in to remind us of the name, Godwin, I'd like to ask you to look for someone called Honorable Stephen Wagaba on the space, and John Bosco Serunkuma. Those are two of the victims that would like to share their experiences here. Aaron?
No, let me refresh my memory on that name, but the key thing is that, I handled it with the lead people, Peter and Odur, but I understand that at least the PSU did its work. There is someone above PSU who is not doing their work, to the best of my recollection. Yeah, that's all I can say for now, but I've texted Odur and Peter to give me the name. Yes, this is the DPC of Hoima, who was culpable and who was speaking with impunity, and eventually he was recorded and exposed, and PSU is handling, and they have done the investigations and so on and so forth, but they have themselves run into stumbling block. She may not say it here on air, but PSU also can also be frustrated. Thank you. Let's continue with the other stories.
Okay, so
Agatha,
yes.
kindly help me type the names in the group so that I can keep looking for them. They keep skipping my mind.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Alex, would you like to come in to respond to anything Ruth has said?
Yes, thank you so much once again, and Ruth, for that. Of course, as we have put it, that security forces are still leading when it comes to cases of torture, and of course, all the statistics still show that police is still high, leading, and of course, the army as well. But of course, many times. There has been this notion that because maybe police gets involved in it's always at the forefront. That's why the numbers are high. But of course, as rightly put from the beginning, that torture is an absolute right. There is no circumstance in what way that torture can be allowed. The whole bit of that police does its investigations, and then the ODPP then they get to prefer now other charges instead of what probably police would have investigated. Of course, that is also a challenge that we have seen. There is still a major challenge across the spectrum within the criminal justice system, the actual understanding of the application of the law against torture. So many times the police or the state, they don't want to prefer cases or torture as a case, and then they will choose to use the penal code, and then they go for assault and grievous bodily harm. This has happened so many times, and of course, in one of our engagements, sometimes with either the police or the state prosecutors, it has come out that sometimes the burden to prove torture is so high. But of course, this shouldn't be an excuse, because even where there is glaring evidence, sometimes other cases have been preferred instead of torture. So I think there is also a challenge when it comes to issues of capacity, but also as Elon put it earlier, that sometimes during investigations of these cases, and also these cases sometimes are perpetrated by big powers, we could say, and then that one becomes a limitation where there is this kind of fear to investigate certain cases. So it has happened, and of course, this is where we need now to come in, and institutions really come in strongly to actually do their work, the police, the state prosecutors, and then the judiciary, to come in to be able to do their work when it comes to these kind of cases of torture. Because one of the major things, as put it, is lack of accountability, which is also becoming contributing to the problem. Because I'll say that we have had limited cases, or actually close to no cases, where for example, people in police or the army have been prosecuted within the courts of law against torture successfully. You'll see that most of them, of course, they are disciplinary courts. Maybe they have been taken to disciplinary courts, and sometimes, as Ruth put it, that we even don't get to know about the outcomes of these cases. So they remain there, and we even don't get to know. The public, which has suffered these violations, doesn't get to know of what has happened. And now the vice continues, because there is this presumed lack of accountability when it comes to cases of torture. So I think we need to have institutions work collectively, but also being bold to address even the powers that sometimes hinder successful accountability for these cases. But of course, as we understand that torture even goes beyond. So this whole issue that we even need to understand that that torture that is not even physical, because we have had so many instances of psychological torture, and even the system fails to recognize it. And then there is actually limited justice to this kind of torture. And many times people have resorted to this because this one now doesn't leave a mark. And that's why one of the things that we even call for is now to be able to have a system that can ably investigate and document torture beyond physical injuries, but also be able to look at psychological injuries. Right now, as we talk, that very few people can, or experts we have that can ably investigate and document psychological torture. But also, even when these cases arise within either police or in court, the system is not able to do due diligence when it comes to psychological issues of torture. And that's why now you'll find that within the system, there is the issue of saying these people are lying. These people are lying. Of course, when people have gone through torture, when I've come to report a case of torture, I would assume that the system, before making conclusions, should be able to competently and effectively investigate this case and be able to rule out the lie or the no lie. But we have had so many incidences, of course, and of course it's very traumatizing in circumstances when someone has been genuinely tortured, and then the system comes out to say, actually, this person is lying. And not that because they have concrete evidence, they have done the due diligence in the investigation, they have done the assessments physically, psychologically, and come to this conclusion. Because, yes, it has happened that people have reported with no actual scars, physical scars, but when you do their psychological evaluation, you'll find that actually there is a high possibility that these people have gone through torture. So that is also a gap when it, and we have had, we understand that so many times this torture happens in closed doors. For example, if someone was tortured and maybe, for example, they had a wound and then they are into custody maybe for a year or two, there's a high likelihood that they'll come out when these scars are not visible. But how do we investigate? How do we evaluate cases of torture? And that's why when we talk about actually what we call the professional documentation and investigation of cases of torture, so that it goes beyond our physical injuries that we know that are obvious, and then we also look at the psychological beat of torture. Of course, as an organization, we have worked with the Uganda Police, the Department of CID, and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to develop a checklist in compiling and investigating cases of torture. Of course, this checklist points out what are the key elements that we need to look out for when someone comes out and allege a case of torture. What are these things that we need to look out for? How should we even document them so that we avoid the bias of saying this one is lying, this one doesn't have this one, things like that. So such things, I think they are very important to look at, and they're very important to address if at all we are to fight this vice of torture.
Thank you, Alex. Ruth, so there's something, yes, that Alex alludes to where you said that some people use that as an excuse. I think even the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission has said that before. But most of the people that say have been tortured, it's actually physical torture. It's not the form of torture that Aaron Chiza was talking about here, the psychological one. So you see the wounds, you see the injuries and the scars. How do you explain that? When you say some are lying because they want to escape responsibility?
Thank you so much. When we go to the definition of torture in the Act, it's not only physical. The clients who receive at PSU don't only report physical torture. Someone will come, how they are threatened, how they are, every night they no longer sleep in their homes because a police officer is hunting after them, a police officer, those other allegations or other concerns as they bring them up. So what is reported at PSU is not only physical. Some people have perceived, we have a charge under the penal code, threatening violence. Someone can, by way of a word, by way of conduct, exhibit some manifestation that you are not safe at his instance. So that is what I was referring to. Someone comes and says, I no longer sleep in my house, I no longer till my gardens, just because police officer so-and-so maybe has interest in this kibanja of mine, has done this, and I'm living under threat. Those are the cases I was referring to when I said some people use it in order to evade justice, where they are being perhaps they are being prosecuted, or he's at the verge of being prosecuted, and they come in a form of perceived torture, or that psychological bit of it, then they come and report. When the investigations are done, what normally is found out it may not necessarily be true. So I was making reference to the physical, because torture may be physical or psychological.
Thank you, Ruth. So you're saying that there are cases that have been investigated and have been found out to be untrue allegations, right?
Exactly. Especially allegations against police officers at PSU.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I have one last question for you before I ask if we got our some of the victims here. The mode of arrest. Police still arrests very violently, bundles people, sits on them under that what we call kabangali, sits on them, and what is that something you guys have looked into? Is it agreeable to the Uganda Police Force? Is it also individual responsibility that some officers are doing that when it's against the Uganda Police Force rules or policies? Or yes.
Thank you so much. Like I said in the beginning, the police force's policy is anti-torture. We have the human rights policy. The outgoing Inspector General of Police launched the human rights policy handbook for police officers in 2019. As a police force, or as a force, we condemn all sorts of mistreatment, manhandling, and the kind of arrest techniques or acts of the way our officers do arrest is not a police force way of doing things. We have so many people we've prosecuted by way of criminal summons. And in our talks, in our barazas, we normally have barazas, we have Monday parades by DPC and the respective stations. We urge our officers not to use force, not to use this, those kind of derogatory ways of arresting people. So, where people are arrested, bundled on pickups, stepped upon, being beaten, that is all torture, and that is all misconduct or unprofessionalism that is handled by Professional Standards Unit. It is not a policy of the force that we should arrest the way most of our officers arrest. And those are instances we are trying to condemn through prosecution, through sensitization and trainings. We do a lot of training of our officers on how, first of all, we tell them the case is not yours. It is Uganda versus that individual. You are just an agent of Uganda. You are a state agent. You can still take this person to court without beating them, without stepping on them, without kicking them. It is a song we are singing. We are doing a lot of sensitization and training. Where it is too much, we've had to prosecute and charge most of those people under misconduct, which we do under our disciplinary courts.
Thank you. Godwin, one of the victims who's here says he has requested for the microphone. He's called Stephen Wagaba.
He requested and then fell off. Even the second one, I've been sending him the microphone like for the 5th time now, and he just won't accept it. So I located both of them, but it's a case of him having to accept. And then the one who was here dropped off, so remind them to get back on.
Okay. So Ruth, let me get back to you. I don't want us to lose you before I ask all the questions we have for the police here.
Yes.
Why doesn't torture feature in police reports when the Uganda Human Rights Commission reports have them, when torture actually exists? Why does the police reports? Why do the police reports, the annual crime reports, always omit torture?
Thank you.
There's only torture against children. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I made some small hint of when I submitted in my introductory bit. Police force does receive complaints on torture, both at PSU against our officers and both at our respective stations against individual persons. The duty, the constitutional mandate of the police force, especially the Directorate of CID, is to receive, record an allegation that is brought, investigate. Like I said, we are not a tribunal or court to decide or adjudicate over cases. Upon our investigations, we normally have a CID. Now I'm talking about an ordinary police station. We have a detective at the counter. We call them standby detectives. When an allegation comes, they are able to categorize it to suit a particular law where we can place that charge. We normally start by having a holding charge. Later, information is extracted from the SCD or record book and taken to the attention of the OCCID. The OCCID allocates it to a detective for investigation. Upon that, the state attorney normally receives, or the office of the DPP normally receives what we have investigated and compiled into a case file for perusal and legal advice. Now, in most cases, we rarely have those torture-related cases, charges preferred under the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act. Basing on evidence on record, the Land State Attorney will advise police to charge under the Penal Code. When we are compiling data so as to publish our annual report, there is no way this matter that was received at the counter and a holding charge was placed under the torture laws, there is no way it is going to feature under the torture laws in our crime report, because the state attorney has preferred grievous harm or assault, and that is what was prosecuted, and perhaps a conviction was secured, and the records in police will show as a conviction was secured in respect to aggravated aggravated assault or aggravated assault. So the reason why we don't have torture cases, apart from torture of children, appearing in our crime reports, because what we investigate at times is not what is prosecuted in courts of law, and we normally compile records of cases that have been perused by the DPP, put away, or charges preferred and have gone to court. That is our submission.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I saw Stephen here, yes. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, so I'm going to, yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm going to first introduce you briefly to the audience. Stephen Wagaba is one of the torture victims. We have interviewed him at Agora for some of the work we are doing on torture, and I know he also is being represented by chapter 4 for his case. I had seen Nicholas here, but I think he dropped off. So he's going to share with us his story and who tortured him and how, share his experience. So Stephen, please go ahead. There's a bit of noise in your background, but maybe when I mute my microphone, it will be clearer.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Wagaba. I'm a 24-year-old Ugandan. I was tortured in last year in October. It was under the cover of darkness. Armed assailants abducted me from my residence, subjecting me to a nightmarish ordeal that unfolded within the confines of military intelligence headquarters in Imbuya. In the harrowing sequence of events, I endured relentless beatings, torture, humiliation, and harassment, electrocution on my breasts, by an individual called Misa Neviona, who happens to be working on the orders of Magogo Moses and Anita Mong, allegedly acting upon those people has conveyed my supposed involvement in an affair with Magogo's girlfriend. Remarkably, subsequent to appearing episode, I was released after 4 days without any formal charges pressed against me. The incident was retroactively labeled as a security issue that Magogo some year back was threatened by somebody, so they thought it was me after a year. And at the same time, I had just arrived in the country. I was studying out of the country. I was doing my course in cyber security out of the country. I was just like 4 or 5 days in the country. When I was taken to Mbuya, I was tortured by Amisa Ineviona. Is a military captain attached to CMI. He happens at the same time to be Magogo's son-in-law. I think Magogo's daughter is a wife or girlfriend to Amisa Ineviona. And Amisa at the same time happens to be working under investigations of FUFA and some other investigations surrounding Anita Mong's family. So I was beaten horribly. At this point, as I speak right now, from my health reports, I can never have kids as a baby, become a parent, because my private parts were damaged, and even urinating at the same time. It's very difficult for me, and I have never had justice. When we tried with Chapter 4 with Mr. Nicholas Opio, we went to Mbuya. We met the boss of Amisa Ineviona, Mr. Rugumayo. I think he's the deputy director of CMI. When we met him, he told us that whatever Amis did that as an individual on the orders of individuals, not as CMI. So we should just treat that case individually, not as a CMI and as an institution of CMI. Up to date, I wrote to Human Rights, Uganda Human Rights Commission. They have never replied. My case also went to Mr. Tom Magambo. I also met the deputy director of CID, Mrs. Cherimo. So I had never had justice up to date, and every day I wake up, I almost lost hope. Every day I wake up, I couldn't believe that I would never have a kid or I would never become a parent. Mr. Magogo acted on allegations that I was having an affair with a girlfriend. But when we called the lady, she said that she had no idea who Magogo was. Up to date, I have never had justice as a person, and I almost lost hope, and I don't think of even waking up to go to work, because I don't see the reason to work. Why would I work when I couldn't even bear kids or have a family or be called a parent? That's the pain I'm living through every day, every night. Even I have nightmares and dreams of what I went through. I'm almost speechless. I don't know what to say even.
I am so sorry too. It's very unfortunate, but I would like to ask if you followed Rugumayo's advice and reported Amisi as a person. Is there a case in court? Have you done anything more to seek justice? Stephen?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I went to CID. I met Mrs. Cherimo. I reported the case. I also wrote to Mr. Tom Magambo. I also wrote to Human Rights Commission. I have never received any reply. And at the same time, you keep on being threatened by Magogo that you'll face some consequences. You must keep quiet. They also accused me when I was still in a CMI of talking to Kakwenza. I had no idea. I have never talked to him, but I was being beaten that I was working with an agent of Europeans and an enemy of the state, that I'm a terrorist. Because my story was aired, I think, everywhere on Kakwenza's page. So they are beating me for the same issue that I'm speaking to Kakwenza. They took my phone, my passport, my watch, my shoes, everything I went with. I never came back with anything up to date. My IDs, foreign IDs, I had citizenship outside. I have never had my ID, my working permits. I don't know what to say, because every time I wake up, I know I can never have a kid. Magogo has sons of the same age as me. They are 24-year-old and a daughter 26, 27-year-old. The same applies to Mongo. And how do they feel if they torture somebody's son? And maybe I'm in a stage that I could never even think of doing anything for myself, because I can't even have that power to wake up and go to work, because I know I'm doing everything for nothing.
Yeah, I am speechless as well. Please help me and mute your microphone for now. You will unmute again. There's that echo that comes in. So I wanted to ask, your sister has been sending me messages and asking me to help you, but I had already had and asking that we do something for you at Agora. But I'd already heard from Nicholas that he was working on your case. But when you say that no one has responded, the people you wrote to, is there a case in court yet, or are you waiting for the response from those other people?
At the moment, I think there is no case in court. I'm waiting for a response from Mr. Nicholas and other people. I sent messages to and letters to. I even approached Mr. Elon, but at the same time, Nicholas was busy outside the country. Elon also, Mr. Elon happens to know about my case.
Okay, we'll get back to you maybe when. Please mute your microphone, Stephen. When we get to the audience and they have maybe anything they want to ask you, I'll get back to you. You can stay on as speaker. I'm going to get back to the panel, and I'm so sorry about what you're going through. I hope that you will find the remedy somehow. We will try and do something. I will talk to the lawyers you're already working with, and we see if there's anything more we can add. So anyway, Aaron, apart from you telling us about Stephen's case, I would also like to ask about the court processes and torture. Two things specifically. The first is that there's a precedent, and courts are not supposed to continue trying people that have been subjected to torture. But that doesn't happen, right? Is it still impunity as you called it? Or has that precedent been disregarded?
No, the precedent stands, but judicial reluctance to strictly enforce torture provisions contributes impunity in Uganda, because some magistrates and judicial officers find every excuses to avoid pretending. For example, like in the Kakwenza case, that there was no torture evidence, which we submitted in broad daylight, and the then Chief Magistrate Sinjiza pretended that he had not seen the torture evidence when even the torture victim was before him, had stripped before him, and so on and so forth. So some judicial officers are not competent to handle torture matters or criminal matters, or lack the balls to take serious criminal proceedings, especially when they arise in a politically controversial context, like the Kakwenza case was.
And what about compensation of torture victims? We have seen courts award costs to to victims of torture and the Uganda Human Rights Commission, but most of those have not received compensation.
Or pretending not to be aware of it. So there is a need for, I would say, further training of judicial officers, but you see, you can't train courage, you can't train integrity, you can't train some things that are needed to tackle torture. So we need to bring our heads together on how we can make occupants of judicial officers more courageous, more committed to end torture. As I've already told you, some judicial officers are even reluctant to hold individual perpetrators accountable for torture, even in light of evidence that is available. But the precedent is there. Those of judicial officers who want to use it actually use it, but there are very few and far between who stop criminal proceedings on account of torture in accordance with the law. Again, as I said, the law is not part of our problems. Our Ugandan law on torture is among the best. It is a model for torture law, but we have issues with our cultures, our unwritten norms that impede the application of those laws. On the specific case of Stephen, you can even see that the way he is talking, he's under pain, and it is heartbreaking. I was talking to him, but we hadn't actually sat down. But I mean, as you said, going forward, we need to take this case more seriously. And I have promised, I've texted him when I heard some of this, that we shall do whatever is within, that is humanly possible, to help him. And but he was also too broken to go. People, the law can provide remedies, but even invoking remedies requires a certain level of mental state to invoke them, mental energy. Judicial processes sometimes are long, and sometimes are themselves, should I say, torturous? Or like, it's not a cup of tea to litigate, whether it is lawyers or litigants, especially when you know how long it can take to get a remedy. By remedy, I mean a judgment, and then after that, the journey begins of getting the fruits. Stephen needs counseling. Stephen needs serious rehabilitation, and together let's work to process that for him. In addition, the case we shall file his case, but he was not yet ready. Even when I did meet him physically, I know how I communicated with him, and clearly he was not in the mental state to file a case, and he had the false hope that those officers he was meeting could help him. They can't help you, Stephen. Magambo is not going to process payment for you or whichever, even if you made a CDF. What we actually need is a court order which can be enforced in the way we helped the Hajara who lost the child to get the 50 million she finally got, but which was inadequate, but at least she can start. As for your issue of impotence, I don't think you should give up. There are new medical procedures that can allow you to impregnate without necessarily even having sex. So let's seize on the hope that is there, and what we need is to actually raise the funding needed. There is a kind of medical attention that is available. Albert Camus once said that while there is life, there is hope. As a lawyer and as a human being, I want to give you hope that there is a hope because you are alive. You will recover. It might take some time because mental torture actually takes years. and it takes time to heal, but there is a solution to your problem because you are alive and because there are people and who are trained professionals, not only in Uganda but even abroad, whom we can work with to solve or mitigate your problem. So, Stephen, we shall work with Agora and Chapter 4 and whoever is and SCTV and other people to provide a solution to your problem. I had actually not understood the extent of your problem, and going forward we shall meet physically and see what we can do about that. Sorry about that heart-wrenching problem. Sorry. What is it, Agatha? Anything else?
Yeah, I was asking about the compensation to torture victims and
Anange,
costs.
mumpurira. Agatha, may I have finished? What is
I
the
can
next?
hear you
Toko?
actually. Toko, can you hear?
I can hear Bobi.
I
Aaron?
Can hear
can
Bobi.
hear you.
But it seems he doesn't hear me.
Yeah, I'm done. Ask me another question or pick another panelist, please.
No, I had another question. If you can hear me now, Aaron, can you hear me?
Agatha, ask the question. I'll put it to him.
No, I was asking him about the costs that have been awarded to torture victims by court, but many torture victims have not received it. What is his experience with that? With maybe the torture victims he's represented?
What's your experience with some of the torture victims you represented and receiving court awards given to them? How easy, how hard has it been for you?
It is extremely hard to get the payments for these torture victims because I even believe that the current Attorney General has a policy of not paying people they associate with opposition, whether they be victims or they are lawyers. So that is a big hurdle to jump. Zake has never received money, and I have got information that I know it is deliberate not to pay him. We have a 70 million bill pending on the table. We have done what is legally possible. I don't know whether we are supposed to physically kneel before the Attorney General before Zake can be paid. And remember, Zake is a member of Parliament. The reason Hajara was paid is because UPDF is quicker, but once even UPDF had the money transferred the Minister of Finance, they tried to play around with that. I had to contact someone in Washington, to contact someone in Kampala to get this thing paid. The things we go through to get even little money from UPDF or from just embarrassing. Imagine we have to run to foreign account to some diplomat, some of this, to speak to this here to get even little money paid to victims of torture. So I have given you two cases. The MP is not paid. I think he will be paid, but they are not interested in effecting the payment. Police is slower. Police is here. UPDF, surprisingly, is more effective in paying victims, although they pay dismally small amount of money. They pay very little money. Even the Hajara money, as little as this, it had to come from court. We had the standoff. The presidential directive was decreeing a certain amount for dead people and one for people who didn't die in the November riots or November demonstration, as the case may be. Imagine tortures. These things are individual things. They handle like now. Imagine Stephen, who is you have had his situation. Imagine someone putting their presidential directive on how much they should not exceed paying him. So it's very unfortunate, and it is injurious to even the assessment officers in their boardrooms to assess when they have no legroom beyond some directives. The things are practical. So the experience has been growing. Getting a case from the beginning, filing pleadings, they must be good. The arguments must be proper. You must attend court sessions. Otherwise, they are happy to dismiss it on any technical objection, despite the human rights enforcement says they don't focus on technicalities. There is someone here, he's not a torture victim, but he's my client. I see him online. They denied him costs and damages merely because the matter was perceived as public interest. He's a lawyer, he's Kandia. I'm free to talk about him. So, you see, even the judicial mind must be on board if we are going to fight the torture in this country or fight human rights abuses. If we can't have the judiciary doing its part, lawyers doing their part, journalists doing their part, we all must pull in one direction. But if either the president or the judiciary or the police are acting like judicial or legal Maguires, scoring own goals, then we will have we still have challenges. So the judicial process is lengthy. There is some reluctance on enforcing some torture laws, and even after getting the judicial, if you may call it the judicial prize, then you have a problem with a government policy, and specifically the current Attorney General, of bias, political bias against opposition, victims of torture, or people whom the regime thinks as on the opposite side, and they are not supposed to be paid, and you have to do a lot of extra legal things. That is why you heard of the case of how the law of Kasango, how he got to be involved in payments, because there are lawyers now who litigate cases finish have to find for commission agents around the town in hotels, doing nothing, knowing little about the law, to get them to pay. Or there are some firms which are perceived or really close to first family, who are the ones now supposed to get to process those awards. And of course, opposition people cannot benefit from such remedies, and even there is a price for that. You have to forego a big chunk, and if the money the court has given you is little, and you are supposed to forego a big chunk as big as half of that or even more, what are you left with? So the remedy is defeated. So there are structural bottlenecks to achieving justice. But the key thing is that we must keep pushing on. We must keep, we should refuse to give up, because they want us to give up. They want us to be numbed. They want us to be frustrated, and we should not. We should be resilient. Anything else I can answer?
Not for now, Aaron. Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, so I'm going to go to the next person as we get people in the
Over
audience
to you,
who
Agatha
might
and Toko.
Gordon, please tell him that, yeah, it's okay. We will get back to him. I don't know why he can't hear me.
Aaron, it's okay. Let's just move on. We have heard you. Let's move to the next one, Alice.
Okay, so Stephen, like Aaron said, I also remember that at one point,
Toko, you need to name the
told me-
panelist. You need to name the panelist to speak, because as
Toko,
we move on
can
to
other
Ruth
people
or to
hear me?
Chigoye Alex.
So we are moving to Stephen,
Godwin,
but Agatha is asking the question. So
Okay.
just hold on. You can mute now. She's moving to Stephen.
Yeah, so Stephen, I was saying that when I talked to Nicholas about your case, I think about 3 months ago, he said that you were hesitant about going to court, and I think even Aaron has alluded to it now. Maybe we can meet and you tell us how you'd like to proceed. But yeah, or if now you have thought about it and thought you should take the matter to court, but we can also explore other avenues.
For issue of the court, at the moment I was traumatized by the incident, and my mental state was not okay. At the same time,
I can imagine.
I was being threatened. I was going through a lot of pain. I couldn't walk well. I no longer put on long trousers because there's the way they affect me. So me, I have nothing for sure at this time to lose. All I want is justice, because I can never see the person who tortured me and the one who ordered the torture out there living freely. At the same time, while I'm suffering because of their actions. Recently, I had lost hope. There is a recent recruitment in UPDF. I had thought maybe if I could join the army and have access to a gun, I could provide justice to myself. but my physical and health appearance couldn't allow me to join the army. But may I would do anything to get justice. The pain I'm going through is I could not control myself. Every day I could think that my future is done because, you know, we all work for families. We grow up to have families and bear kids, and I think that is every happy man must have a kid. If you can't have a family, I think, to me, I think I'm useless. That's my thinking. Those are my thoughts. Every time I go to bed, I wake up in the morning. That's the same thing I think.
No, Stephen, I don't think you are useless. We can all work together, like we said here. I have received many messages of people that are going to participate in ensuring that you get justice. And like Aaron said, we probably can also explore medical treatment and see if that can be reversed. Please mute your microphone. We will get back to you. Thank you. Yeah, that's really, really difficult to do that. Wow. Godwin, did you fail to find Ronald Maega, who was using Serunguma, John Bosco Serunguma? If we cannot find him, let's open up the space for the audience to contribute. I don't know if you can hear me, Goodwin.
I can hear you. I'm adding them already.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask Alex, as we get the audience, Alex and Ruth, to say something. For Alex, my question for ACTV and you in particular here is one, what's the cost of torture? The cost of torture, as people who have done research here, but also the rehabilitation. Have you followed up with people? Have they recovered? For example, the cases would like to know how they ended, like the case of that guy from Kamwenge. He was called Godfrey Biarhanga, I think, or Biamkama. Did he recover? Did his legs, does he still have legs? Do you follow up all these cases to their logical conclusion, or?
Thank you, Agatha, and really I also want to stand with Stephen. And Stephen's case gives us an understanding what it means to go through torture. Torture traumatizes you, torture strips you of your human dignity, and torture puts in a position where actually you can't even make substantive decisions for yourself. Many times they have asked us a question that how come your numbers are so high compared to the numbers of Uganda Human Rights Commission? As I said, that we receive about 1,000 clients per year that allege torture, and of course human rights ranges between 200, 300 cases that they register. And of course, so many times police has asked us, why don't you refer those cases that you handle to us? The answer lies in what Stephen has expressed there. We have received so many people, and they are so much traumatized even to record a statement at police or to record a statement at Uganda Human Rights Commission. And so many of them have also said, what I need really is for me to be better, is for me to be rehabilitated and go back on my foot and live a life. I don't want to go through that very strenuous process of court. So that's where actually how we need to understand when it comes to the trauma that is generated from torture. And really that story should speak to anyone who actually engages in cases of torture. You actually destroy someone's life forever. going to your question, yes, as an organization, we follow up cases, we follow up survivors through rehabilitation, and to ensure that they are brought back to close to what they were. I'll tell you, Agatha, and all the listeners, that we can't, there are circumstances where we can't rehabilitate someone back to their full position for which they were before torture. For example, if someone lost a leg, we can't give them a leg. The only thing, of course, they will have a prosthetic leg, but this is not their natural design, what God created them with. So you can have things that are seemingly what was there before, but in the actual reality, when it's impossible. For example, the other thing, people who are traumatized psychologically, you'll find that, yes, we shall give this psychological support, give all the psychological counseling that is needed. Yes, people will recover. But along the way, maybe 5 years, 10 years along the way, they will have a relapse. And then they will have to go through actually another series of counseling and rehabilitation again. So this is what torture can do to a person. And talking to the cost of rehabilitation, it is immense. It is too high, really, to rehabilitate a person. And that's why actually it becomes very frustrating to people who have been awarded compensation and that compensation doesn't come on time. Because we would hope that at least sometime when this compensation come in time, then these survivors can use this compensation at least to meet some of the rehabilitation costs, to afford a doctor, to afford a psychologist, to afford a lawyer, maybe to do whatever that they need with that money, to revamp themselves with a livelihood that probably would have been lost. So the cost of rehabilitation is so high. For example, if we are only to calculate psychological counseling, an average session for a psychologist will go between 150 to 300,000. That's on average. And someone will require an average of 10 to 20 sessions. So you can calculate how much that one will cost just to get psychological counseling. You've not put on medical treatment. We have had people who have to go major surgeries. For example, they have to go through orthopedic surgeries, and these ones range between 5 million and 20 millions. And surprisingly, most of the equipment that is needed, for example, to reconstruct someone who has undergone a fracture, major fractures, you'll find that the government hospitals actually don't have this equipment. So even though you're in a government hospital, you will need to buy this equipment outside a government hospital, a government facility. And many times these equipment are very high. The cost is so high. So in a nutshell, yes, rehabilitation is very costly, is very high.
I'll get back to you. I see we have finally been lucky to get another victim. He's here as Serunkuma, but his actual name's Ronald Maiga. Ronald, can you hear us? Oh, naye osobola kwogera mu Luganda, whichever language is easier for you. Ronald or Serunkuma, as the name we see here, John Bosco. Otuwulira? Yeah, there must be a problem. I think he has dropped off again. No, but I can see him on. I don't know what we can do to have him. Let me tell the person that was put. Oh, he has, huh? Okay, I'm going to tell the person that was helping us get in touch with him. I actually see David Lewis is on. He's the one who was trying to get us Ronald. So, DL, if you can find him and if we can hear from him, it would be nice. For now, let's continue with the rest that are here as we wait for him. Ruth? Ruth, are you still on? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, yes, you are still on. I have. I wanted to ask if you wanted to say something special about what others have said or the ordeal of Stephen as we go to the audience.
Thank you so much, Agatha. As a mother, as a Ugandan, as a human being, I'm in shock. I'm in shock to hear that my brother, a Ugandan, a human being, had to go through that. I'm really, really, really sorry for him. And it is upon that background that I call upon the general public as a police officer. Like I introduced myself, I'm from the Directorate of CPC. Under that directorate, we have Child and Family Protection and Community Policing. As police, as we try to fight crime, we do sensitization, we do community policing. Before we charge, before we receive that complaint, as members of the public, as visitors on this globe which God created, I just take this opportunity to call upon everyone, whether you are who, whether you are high in the skies, as long as you are flesh and blood, I just call upon everyone to hate torture, to condemn torture in the strongest of terms. I'm a police officer, yes, I have blood and flesh, but I just call upon everyone to hate torture. There is no justification for torture. You cannot subject someone, irrespective of the reason, irrespective of the grievance you have with that person. Never, ever, whoever is listening, whoever is viewing, whoever, kindly, as human beings, we are visitors. At one time, you will all be breathless, and someone will have to carry you to that resting place if you are lucky to be carried anyway. I just call upon everyone. Now I'm talking as a community sensitizer, as a community liaison officer. Let us hate torture. Let us hate torture. Let us find other means of resolving conflicts. Let us find alternative means than subjecting someone to torture of whatever form. But more especially the physical. It is all torture, but it is really very, very absurd that my brother has to be the victim and casualty he is when he was something and someone else. I also take this opportunity to thank and commend the public. When you read this report that was recently launched, the statement, we are appreciating the general public for coming up to expose these perpetrators of torture. And I just urge everyone, as we hate and fight and refrain from torturing our sisters and brothers, fellow human beings, let us continue exposing. Let us continue exposing, because as a police force, we have really responded. We have responded to such instances like the Shakira. Recently, there was a case of small girls being flogged by an askari in Kamuli, some boarding school in Kamuli. So public, let us refrain, let us hate, then let us, in case it has happened, let us kindly expose using whatever means we have. That is what I can say now.
Thank you. Ruth, also what I can say is that hating torture is not enough. Deterrence is what we need the most. You sit in a position where maybe you could do more. I don't know. When you spoke about Police Standards Unit, the Human Rights Department of the police, I think more can be done by the security forces, by the authorities. But yeah, people shouldn't go through what Stephen and many others, the Kakwenzas, Ronnie, who is now back here, are going through. But thank you, Ruth. I don't know if you want to respond to that. Yes, I see him. Ronnie, can you hear us now? I think sebo tubadde twagala kuwulirizaako twarabye recently nti baakutulugunya tubadde twagala otubuulire nga bwe byagenda. Forgive my Uganda everyone, but yeah, I'll try.
Okusookera ddala nja beetondera nti obwedda nzija nga bwe nvaako network obwedda omuliro gutawaanya ate nga simanyi nnyo okukozesa Twitter. Amannya agange yenze Mayiga Ronald Omunyarwanda wa Bobi abangi byasinga okutegeera. Natulugunyizibwa emirundi egisukka mu gumu. Omulundi kansooke n'omulundi ogusembyeyo nawambibwa mu bitundu by'e Nansana nentwalibwa mu bifo bye sitategeera oba kwendi banange.
Kodi tukuulira Ronald.
Nentwalibwa mu bitundu nange bisitategeera kubanga nawambibwa abantu abaali bakutte mundu nga bambadde engoye za bulijjo. Essaawa zaalinga wakati w'4:05 nga nzire waka okumpi ne wensula nasangayo emmotoka eyali epaakinze gye sitalowooza nti oba ya bulabe gyendi. Natunuzibwamu emmundu abantu be nasobola okulabako mukadde abo baali bana ne bantunuzamu emmundu ne baŋŋamba mbeere wansi era ne nzikirira ku ttaka ne bannyambaza ekikookolo mangu ddala ne banteeka mu mmotoka ne bantwala gye sitaasobola kutegeera. Bwe bantwala bagendanga bambuuza nti Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine oli naye essaawa zino ekyamazima era ne mbaddamu nti nedda. Naye bagendanga bankuba nga bwe bambuuza Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine abasasula ssente meka okubeera nga mukola bye mukola. Nensirika naye nga buli mulundi gwe nsirika nga bankuba era bansamba mu lubuto ne bansamba omugongo. Oluvannyuma lwa byonna lwe bantuusa mu kifo kye sitaasobola kumanya kubanga nali nyambaziddwa ekikookolo ne bantwala gye nasobola okusanga omwami eyambuuza ebibuuzo nga simulaba mu feesi ye kuba nali nyambaziddwa ekikookolo nga ndi musibe ku njegere ne ku mpingu naye nga bansika bantambuza. Omusajja n'ambuuza nti gwe Ronnie Omunyarwanda wa Bobi? Ne muddamu nti yenze ssebo. Nangamba nti Kyagulanyi abasasula ssente meka? Ne mugamba munaye talina ssente zatusasula. N'abantegeeza nti twakuwa ssente okole naffe gwe n'ogaana okukola naffe ate ogamba Kyagulanyi talina ssente zabasasula okukola bye mukola. Kati ogenda kubikolera ku bwereere oba ssente mwazigaana? N'ensirika ssabaanukula. Ne bansamba ne ngwa ku ttaka ne bambuuza mukama waffe akubuuza tomuddamu. Ne mpitaba bwe nayitaba naŋŋamba ogenda kukola naffe oba togenda kukola naffe? Olw'okuba nti nali wakati mu kukubibwa mu kutulugunyizibwa okw'ekitalo naddamu nti nja kukola nabo. Ne banzizaayo. Bwe banzizaayo abasajja ne bajja nga wayiseewo akaseera ne bantwala ne bansibira ku byuma side ne side nga bankutamiza ne banzijamu empale yange ne banyambula ne bankozesa mu kabina kange. Bwe bankozesa nawulira nga abantu abankozesa emirundi 2 kubanga oli bwe yantuusa yagamba munne nti nkuleeteddeyo akakyala oli n'aseka naye ng'abantu abo bonna saasobola kubalaba. Bwe baamala okunkozesa wakati mu kubeera nga bansibye empingu mu kulaajana okw'ekitalo banzizaayo ne baŋŋamba singa onoogenda mu maaso n'oyogera ebintu bino ebikutuuseeko ogenda kusibibwa obulamu bwo bwonna oba okuttibwa. Togezangako n'oyogera ku bintu bino byonna ebikutuuseeko. Ne banzizaayo we baali bankuumira okuva lwe bampamba tebanzigyako kikookolo. Bwe bandigyanga ekyokulya baddiranga ne bambusa ekikoofiira ekyo kye bansatadde ku mutwe ne bakiteeka wano okumpi n'ennyindo yange. Ne bankwata omukono gwange ne baguteeka mu kintu ekibaleeteddemu ekyokulya wabula okutegeera nti ndi mu kulya kawunga na bijanjaalo mbiwulira bimaze kutuuka mu kamwa. Ekyokulya era y'engeri gye nanywangamu amazzi gonna ge baali bampadde. ne baddamu ne bantwala omulundi ogwaddako ne bantwala ne mpulira eddoboozi nga waliwo ery'omukyala. Omukyala kyava mbuuza nti ssebo wani amannya go ne nga muddamu. Bwe nagamuddamu n'ambuuza oyina bazadde bo? Ko nze mbayina. N'ambuuza bakuzaalawa? Ne muddamu nti Mityana. N'ambuuza oyina emyaka emeka? Oyina famire? Oyina omukyala? Oyina abaana? Byonna ne mbibaddamu. Ne baŋŋamba lwaki ogenda kufa ku myaka emito? Lwaki mwesibye ku Bobi Wine omuyaaye okubalimbalimbanga n'abakozesa ensobi n'ensirika? Naŋŋamba kaakati bw'oba osirise nga toyagala kwogera naffe, ffe tulina obulamu bwo. Ne mbeegayira ne mbagamba naye temunzita, nakkiriza ngenda kukola nammwe. Omwami ne mpulira eddoboozi ly'omwami yali mugamba nti muleke mmubuuze. Mwami kyava mbuuza gwe eyeeyita Omunyarwanda wa Bobi, ki ekikolaganya n'omusajja omuyaaye Omuganda? Goli musajja Munyarwanda, kale ogenda kufiira ku myaka emito. Lwaki tokkiriziganya naffe ku bye tugamba? Omwami ne muddamu ssebo nkwegayiridde temunzita, nakkiriza edda okukola nammwe. Kyava ŋŋamba singa onoogaana okukola bye tugamba, kkiriza nti ogenda kufiirwa obulamu bwo, naye Kyagulanyi talina kyagenda kufiirwa. Ali mu balimbalimba bo nga bwe balinnya ennyonyi bwe batambula bwe bagenda. Ne muddamu ssebo temunzita, ngenda kukola nammwe. Omwami ne bagamba mumuzzeeyo, ne banzizaayo. Mu kunzizaayo mba ndi mu kkubo bantwala bano abaalinga bankima bwe bantwala bwe banziza. Naŋŋamba mwe mulowooza nti wano muyina muyinza okwekweka, ono temuyina muyinza kwekweka, ate ffe tulina obulamu bwammwe. Then bwe nagendanga ne mpumulamu ne bamala ne bankima oluvannyuma lw'obudde okuyitawo. Bwe natuuka omwami n'ambuuza gwe Mayiga Ronald tiwanyisewo, wuliriza ebigambo bino, oli mweteefuteefu okukola naffe? Nti yeesebo ndi mweteefuteefu okukola nammwe. Naŋŋamba wuliriza bye twagala otukolere. Bw'okola bino weewangulidde miliyoni 300 ebya Uganda. Banno tugenda bawa obukadde 200 kubanga gwe tukuwa 3 kuba gwe ogenda okubanga gwe kikulembeddemu. Twagala bw'otuuka mu court martial ey'amagye gy'obunaanibwa emisango ne banno Balutaya Olivia, Basekituuko Yasini Machete n'abalala, Basekasaanya, wanika omukono mu kkooti ogambe nti nze Mayiga Ronald omuvunaana wa namba 4 ku musango awamu ne bannange mbamenya amannya ge baŋŋamba okwogerako kwe kwali erya Lutaya Olivia, kwe kwali erya Sekasaanya Mujahideen, kwe kwali erya Muwanguzi Paulo, kwe kwali erya Kamanya Kenneth, kwe kwali erya Kato Emaumalu. Baŋŋamba amannya gaali 10 n'erya Sekasaanya. Baŋŋamba ogambe nti twetonda okwetondera kooti awamu ne President Museveni awamu n'eggwanga lyonna, twawubisibwa ne tuyingizibwa mu bikolwa bye tutategeera bulungi kiki byali bitegeeza, nga twawubisibwa Bobi Wine oba Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ng'atulimbye okutuwa ebyobugagga kono tutwala amawanga g'ebweru. Naye nze nga ali ku beyiro bwe natuuse wabweru ne twogezegana n'Ekyagulanyi oba Bobi Wine n'agaana okuba ng'atuwako ebyo byatusuubiza. Awo nno wenzijidde twetondere kooti ko ne President Museveni atuwe ekisonyiwo kubanga twawubisibwa, ate nga eyatuubya agaanye okutuwa byatusuubiza. Ne baŋŋamba bw'onoobanga omaze okukola ekyo ogenda kubanga omaze okuwangulira obukadde bwa Uganda 3. Banno nabo bagenda kufuna obukadde 4 era ne bankakasa nti bo abali mu kkomera bakkiriziganyizza dda nabo nze ali ebweru ku beyiro, naye nze nnyina okutandika ekyo kubanga nze mba nagenze ne nsaba Kyagulanyi wa Bobi Wine byatusuubiza n'abitumma kwe kujja okwasa ebyama. Era ne bantegeeza nti singa sisobole kukola kintu ekyo obulamu bwange mbusiibule oba okusibwa mu kkomera, obulamu bwange bwensigazza. Kakati mu mbeera eyantusibwako bw'etyo wakati mu kutya nakkiriza nti nja kubikola naye ng'ekyamazima nga bwe navaayo ne ndabikira ku mawulire agasobola okulaga ekituufu nga njokyeddwa paasi nga ndiko amabwa ag'empingu, ebyo nabyogera nti nja kukola nabo nga wakati mu kutya, wakati kuba nti nali simanyi na wendi era nga nina okukkiriza munda mu nze nti nali nsobola okufiirayo. Naye bwe navaayo amangu ddala gye bansuula ku Sentema Road, obudde bwali bwa kiro, abazira kisa kye bannonda ne banzirusa mu ddwaliro. Natuuka nga nnyambibwako ba lawyers, Secretary General NUP David Royce Lubongoya ne banzijanjaba. Bwe nafunamu ku maanyi nasobola okugenda eri abamawulire okunyonnyola eggwanga biki ebintuusiddwako. Nafuna obuvumu obwogera ku ebyo olw'ensonga si gwe mulundi gwange ogwali gusoose okutulugunyizibwa. Natulugunyizibwa omwaka gwa 2021 nawambibwa ennaku z'omwezi nga 12 omwezi ogwokutaano olunaku lwali lwakusatu mu bitundu by'e Nansana. Waliwo ebbala emanyikiddwa nga Big Stone, nali nkulosinga okuva ku Centenary Bank yaawo. Nawambibwa abaami abo bo nasobola okubalabako kuba budde bwali bwa misana. Baali bakutte emmundu nga bamu bali mu civilian clothes, abalala nga bambadde ebyambalo eby'amagye, abalala nga bambadde uniform eza black abajjaati. Ne bajja ne bantunuzaamu emmundu. Awo nno saali nzekka, nali ne muganda wange Nyombi Richard naye nga yasobola okufuna omukisa n'apaayo ku beyiro. Waliko omukyala gwe sitajja kwatuukiriza amannya kubanga oyo baamusobyako, wabula mu kumusobyako baamuta oluvannyuma y'ennaku 3 nga bamusobezzaako. Naye ekyennaku nti baagenda ne baripootinga ku poliisi e Nansana nga bamaze okutukwata, which means nti baali abantu abamanyikiddwa nti bakuuma ddembe. Naye bwe baamala otutuusa ku poliisi e Nansana ne batwambaza ebikookolo ne batutwala gye tusaasooka kumanya, wabula oluvannyuma namanyaayo kubanga eyo namalayo omwezi mulamba. Naye wakati mu kuntulugunya banzijjamu amannyo mu kamwa era ne bonsanga essaawa zino siina mannyo mu kamwa. Baagajjamu nga bakozesa magalo ne bansiba amayinja ku busajja bwange era ne mmala omwezi mulamba ne weeks 3 n'ekitera minimax prison natuusibwayo ng'era nfuyisa musaayi. Essaawa zino siina mannyo mu kamwa nga ebitongole ebyeyita ebikuuma ddembe ab'amagye bye nalaba obulungi kubanga be bankwata. Naye ekyennaku nti mukuntulugunya bannyambazanga ebikookolo nga sisobola kulaba kigenda mu maaso. Naye awo nkakasiza ddala nti baali bakuuma ddembe, ne ku mulundi guno ogusembyeyo baali bakuuma ddembe kubanga baali bakikozeeko mu Lwatu. Bwe baamala batwala mu kooti y'amagye e Makindye eyali ekulemberwa ebiseera ebyo omwami General Andrew Ogut. Oluvannyuma lwa byonna mu kulaga obutali bumativu bwaffe ne muganda wange Ssekasanya Mujahideen nga n'essaawa zino akyali mu kkomera yasibibwa oba yaweebwa ekibonerezo kya myezi 8 olw'okubeera nti yakulemberamu obukulaga obutali bumativu mu mbeera gye twali tusibwamu mu butatuwa bwenkanya n'okutupaatiikako emisango. Kyannaku nti batuusa mu kooti eyo nga wayise batusooka ne batusomera omusango gw'okusangibwa n'ebintu ebibwatuka nga bbomu. Bwe bamaliriza nga bayiseewo emyaka 2 miramba nga ffe bamaze n'okutuwa beyiro kubanga beyiro baagituwanga ennaku z'omwezi zaali nga 3 omwezi ogwokuna omwaka 2023. Deni nga bamaze okutuwa ddiiru eney'okukkiriza omusango ogw'okulya mu nsi olukwe, baggulawo omusango omupya ng'ennaku z'omwezi 4 omwaka 2023 omwezi ogwokuna. Kitegeeza nga wayise olunaku lumu ffe nga bamaze okutuwa beyiro nga batuwadde ddiiru eyo. Era nsanze obuzibu bw'amaanyi nnyo kubeera nga babadde nga bawa amasimu agankubirwa ku simu yange nga gantiisatiisa, agamu nga ganneegayiya okubanga nkola bo bye baagala. Era nga n'ogumu ku mulundi gwe nalipootinga ku kitebe kya National Platform nasindikibwa abantu abaneyanjulira nti bavudde ow'omukulu Minisita Balamu. Awo nno waali wayise ewiiki ng'emu ng'omukulu Balamu bakamuwa obwa minisita. which means nti omukulu bana mu obwa minisita bamuleeta nga jidde ku ddiiru era y'ensonga lwaki yagamba nti agenda kulirizinga abantu bonna abakwatibwa ku nsonga z'ebyobufuzi. Kyannaku nti wakati mu kubyogera balemeddwe okukola ekyo ekigoberera amateeka wabula ate ne badda mu kusaanyawo obusaanyi obulamu bwaffe. Nze nno nga Mayiga Ronald nzikiriza nti kituufu basobola okunzita naye navaayo njogere amazima kubanga byebyo bye basobola okukola. Badde nsaba okuleka nga waliwo alina ekibuuzo kyonna kyambuuza naye nja kusaba akimbuze mu lulimi Luganda kubanga lwe nsinga okutegeera. Mpozi ne neetonda okubeera nga mweno akawunti eya Sserunkuma John Bosco kubanga ekyamazima nze ebintu bya Twitter sibimanyi nnyo ate nga n'abantu bennyini abampamba essimu yange gye nali nkozesa bagintwalako. Badde nsaba waba waalina ekibuuzo kyonna asobola okukimbuuza neyanza nnyo neyanze.
Ronald, tewali buzibu tweyanziza okuba ng'osobodde okwogera naffe mu ngeri yonna gy'osobodde. I am so sorry simanyi nakyakwogera naye mbadde njagala kukubuuzayo ekibuuzo kimu. Owulira otya kati mpozi kansooke ngambeko abantu abali ku mukutu guno abazze nga tumaze okukwanjula. So Ronald is one of the 32 NUP supporters that have been in prison, but he was released on bail last year. And from what he's saying, he was first tortured when he was first arrested. I have been in contact with him and the 3 others that were released on bail, and I have been told these stories before. And these guys say they are still feeling a lot of pain in their chests and backs. And now he was tortured again. We saw photos, and when he said Bankoze Samukabina, I hope everyone understood that as being sodomized, sexually abused, and all that. So Ronald, njagala kubuuza owulira otya kati mainly weewulira otya kati okyali mu bulumi okyali bakyakujanjaba?
Right now nkyali ku treatment naye nga ekyamazima sewulira bulungi nga nze ng'omuntu sisobola kwebaka olw'ensonga buli kaseera mbeera ngugumuka, mbeera ndaba abantu abagenda okuntwala okumpamba mba mpulira amaloboozi mu matu gange. So ekyamazima siri bulungi n'akatono ate nga nkyalina peni ey'amaanyi ennyo kubanga ne bwe ngenda obugenze emmanju weewaawo nga ndi ku treatment mpulira bubi nnyo kubanga ennaku eza nalinga ne bwe ngende emanju
tubadde tetukuwulira bulungi network ebadde evuddeko naye kati tukuwulira ebyoyogedde eddakiika ng'emu oba 2 eziwedde tetubiwulidde bulungi. Ronnie, ompulira kati? Ronald, bw'oba osobola kumpulira agenda mu maaso obadde ovuddeko network kirabika ebadde egaanyemu. Well, Godwin, am I the only one who cannot hear him?
Yeah, I can't hear him either.
Yeah, so
no, Agatha, you're not alone. We all can't hear him.
I think we've lost him. So he still shows to be on, but maybe we can continue and see if he will come back. Ronald, put it up.
It's just showing connecting. That means he has lost network.
Okay, since you already have the microphone, Mwoyo Gwagwanga.
Yeah, I would like.
Can you tell us
like to
your name?
Yeah, my name is
yes.
Rahim. Rahim is my name, and I would just love to. I would like to continue from where you. Just add a point or a message on what's happening in Uganda. Torture. But before we look at how we can, facilitate or create these victims of torture, we should also look at the torturers. The people who torture the people, the Ugandans. You get. We should look at them, because once those people stop torturing people, I don't think these victims will be there. We should also look at these people abatulugunya abantu nabo tubatunuulire kubanga nabo gwe mutu omukulu. Jukira omuntu ahead of the country ye mwennyini akulaga nti asupportinga these acts of torture, avaayo n'asiima n'abo abakola torture. Ekitegeeza n'abo abakola torture bagenda kubanga bagenda mu maaso okukola zi torture zino. They will not have any massive nga batocharinga bana Uganda kubanga head of the country awagira torture owekitegeera. Ate nga jukira all Ugandans tebasidinga naye owekitegeera. Ekitegeeza bonna bana Uganda bali victims of torture. Ng'otunuulidde mabega banono kati be batono abasobola okuvaayo ne bajja ku online bana Uganda ne babategeera nti batocharingibwa. Naye waliwo abo, those guys who are not hard but they have been subjected to all sorts of torture. Nabo gye bali eyo. Ne kati kinagwawo kitya, tulina kusooka kukondeminga akulira eggwanga lino kuba bino ebintu bigenda maaso abiraba obwekitegeera babiraba ab'amagye ani abatwala si ye. Ekitegeeza tulina kukondeminga ye gwe tunoteeka ku nninga eyandibadde ng'ekiddukiro kyaffe ekya Uganda Human Rights naye omulaba si byaliko. Bamutwalira cases z'abaana abaabula agamba abo tebaliyo as those are ghosts. Kati ekitegeeza Ugandans will never get any sort of obwenkanya because system yonna nfu oba ekitegeera. N'ogenda nti oba ogenze mu ba lawyers abasobola okulwanira abana Uganda nabo babeera compromised. Ekitegeeza nti the whole system in the country is just a mess. So buli kimu okutereera nga head naye maze okutereera nti supporting gundi these forms of torture oba ekitegeera. So this is all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Rahim. Ronnie, obadde ovuddeko?
Network
obakati osobola otuwulira?
Nkuwulira.
Kankwenda kikanga bbiri omaliriza otubuulira by'obadde otugamba.
Neyanze. Kakati wambuuza nti neewulira ntya? Essaawa zino nkyali ku treatment, neewulira si bulungi. Bwe mba ngenze manju nkyawulira pain ey'amaanyi weewaawo nga ndi ku treatment. Omubiri gwonna gunnuma kuviira ddala ebibegabega, ensingo, omutwe, omugongo n'okutuula. Ekyamazima sisobola kutuula kiseera kiwanvu wadde okumira ekiseera ekiwanvu. Weewaawo nga ndi ku treatment. Seebulya bulungi n'akatono. Mbadde mbategeeza nti ebbaluwa ezikonfaninga bye njogera weeziri okuva mu ddwaliro eya private n'okuva mu ddwaliro erya gavumenti oba eddwaliro abasirikale ba polisi gye bansindika okugenda okukeberebwa oba ddala bye njogerako nti nasiyagibwa bituufu. Era ebbaluwa weeziri endala bazinsabye oziteeka ku fayiro naye ba lawyers abankwasibwa ekitebe ekya NUP nabo basigazaako kopi. Kuleka nga waliwo ekibuuzo ekirala kyonna ekiyinza okumbuzibwa naye nga sinagenda ku kibuuzo. Waliwo ensonga nnyingi nnyo ze mutasobola kumanya, nazo njagadde nzogereyo katono mu dakiika emu. Baganda bange Balutaya Olivia, ba Machete, ba Ssekasanya bagoba amawulire mu kkooti ey'amagye olw'ensonga nti bwe batuusibwa mu kkooti n'eyo mu kkomera batulugunyizibwa. Ettulugunyizo teryakoma kubabeerako oba teryakoma kutubeerako nga tuli mu safe house wokka, wabula ne mu kkomera gye bakuumibwa gye baatwalibwa okukumibwa batulugunyizibwayo bya nsusso. Ne ku kooti masho wennyini bwe tuba tutuusiddwa oba babaleeteddwa batulugunyizibwa ebyensusso. Y'ensonga lwaki baagoba mu kooti eyo bannamawulire. Nategeezeddwa nti ne luutu ewedde bwe baabaleeta kuba nange naliyo nga tebannaba kumpamba guno omulundi ogusembyeyo, baganda baffe abasirikale ab'amagye baabayisaamu ensambagere ne babakuba, abamu ne babasindika mu ndabirwamu era zaabasala. Era manyi nti y'ensonga lwaki bakandalaliza okubazza mu kkooti, bakyagezaako okubajjanjaba okubeera nga ebiwundu ebyo bizibikira. Era naffe baatulwisa mu safe house olw'obukosefu bwe twali tuyina. Kuliko muganda waffe Muganza Joseph, oyo yakubwa ebiyiso, yakwatibwa nga mulamu bulungi naye ku ssaawa za leero yagongobala, tasobola kutambula. Abaagala okukakasa ekyo mugende mu Maxon Bay prison, Luzira Maxon Bay, musange muganda waffe Muganza Joseph. Bw'aba atambula bawanirira muwanirire, bw'aba tasobola kuyimirira era ne bw'abeera mu kkooti abeera atudde. Abasobola okulabako emabega ng'amawulire gakyakkirizibwa mu kkooti ey'amagye mwabiraba. Muganda waffe gwe mwalabanga ng'abeera atudde si oyo yekka, bangi nnyo abalina obukosefu obw'amaanyi. Waliwo ne muganda waffe mwawulire abalooya nga boogera eyali alina okulongoosebwa, Mwase Patrick. Mwase Patrick oyo ali mu kkomera ery'ekitalya Minimax Prison. Era naye ayagala okukakasa byenjogera akyaleyokko asobola okwekakasiza agende ayite erinnya erya Mwase Patrick amunyonyole, era ne baali bamuwadde appointment mu kkomera nga bagenda kumulongoosa. Obuzibu bwonna bwava ku tocha. Bangi nnyo baganda baffe abaafuna obuzibu oba obuvune ku mibiri gyabwe. Kuliko muganda waffe Kamanya Kenneth yabwebwa beyiro, era naye alina empapula ez'abasawo ng'omugongo gwe yagenda okuva mu kkomera kubanga baamutulugunya nga joint zava mu position era abadde ku treatment. Essaawa zayo simanyi bw'ali, naye ayagala okukakasa ebyo asobola okumunoonyaako. Kuleka nga waliwo ekibuuzo ekirala awo nsobodde okukomako neyanza nnyo neyanzeege.
Tweyanziza Ronald wabaleko kutugambe no kubanga okay, this is a very difficult story. I'm so sorry I can't speak any more Uganda than that. Yeah, I'm also sorry for going overtime in this space. It was very important for us to hear these stories. I don't know how we will heal as a country. I don't know how people sleep at night, but also I don't know what we can do for these people. Maybe we can contribute to their treatment and rehabilitation. But yes, I am glad we still have a member of the security forces here. And Ruth, you've heard for yourself the stories from these two young people. They are very young people. I think Stephen told us he's 24. I have seen Ronald is a very young man as well. As you said, no one's child should be subjected to that. No human being should be subjected to this. I hope when you go back you can preach this maybe more than you do now. And it's not to say that you're not doing enough, but